This morning I'm talking about the spiritual process of change. You can be a traveler on the spiritual path from childhood to adulthood and yet not undergo the process of spiritual change. I think this is a very interesting statement. Why? Most people don't think about undergoing spiritual change in their life. But the teaching wants us to think about these things. And as parents, then we're going to pass this information on to our children. Or as grandparents, we can pass this information on to our children and their children, until eventually this whole concept takes hold. And when it does, the meaning and the purpose of their life is going to change. When we think of spiritual change, the majority will think about changing their religion. But spirituality has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with our spirit, our soul. When we really think about this, what the teaching is telling us, that the purpose of our life is to realize and manifest the potential that we have been born with, that we have brought into this life. And this is what spiritual change is all about. In the teaching of Agni Yoga, there is a phrase that's very curious. It's called self-perfectment, which means those who are traveling this path of spiritual change are going to be striving toward improvement, improving upon the level of achievement that they are right now, so that we don't stay where we are and be comfortable with that. If we're on this planet, let's say for 80 years, we might live to 100, but to the age of 80, we're still pretty active. We're still flexible. We can walk normally, and we're so curious. There's part of us that still has a curiosity about life. When this happens, we don't want to, let's say when we reach 80, of course if you're 30, you never think about being 80. It's like 80, oh my God, that's like Methuselah. But once you reach 80, or 70 or 60 or 50, people begin to fall into a level of comfort where unknowingly, almost unknowingly, they have lost their curiosity for greater success, more achievement, improvement of self. But this is the thing that I hope grandparents are going to pass down to parents, and parents are going to pass down to their children, is that we are born into this life, into the next life, to build upon our potential, to release it, to build it, and surpass it. We are not here just to see how much money we can accumulate in our savings account and checking account, so by the end of our life we can leave all of that money to our children. See, that's not the purpose of life. So the process of spiritual change is the process of how spiritual students live their life. that every day, they try to find a way that they can bring change in their life. Sometimes I think that students feel like they have to make a really big change. And if they have to make a really big change about their life, they're not going to do it. It's seemingly overwhelming to them. So I suggest just start with something small and then build upon that. Start with a small change. And when I'm talking about small change, we have to understand what spiritual change means. Spirit, as we say so often, spirit is fire. Spirit is creative fire. So we're going to use the creativity of the spirit of our life to begin to advance in our consciousness. So it may mean changing a habit. It may mean reading a book that's going to change your consciousness. It may mean changing your immediate environment. In the Agni Yoga teaching, there are several references to the effects that an Agni Yogi experiences as they travel a path that we call the path of transformation. The Great One indicates that as a yogi undergoes the spiritual process of change, their health is going to be affected. Helena Rourke's writings in her notebooks substantiates this statement. In the book Agni Yoga, verse 201, it says, "There exists the false impression that a yogi possesses unfailing health in the usual sense. But, as the verse goes on to say, can one fashion a sensitive instrument out of a log? Does not the value of the strings of the veena, which is like a guitar or lute used in India or Tibet, does not the value of the strings of the veena lie in their response to the finest intervals of tone? Equally resonant is the sensitive apparatus of a yogi. Indeed, to the yogi alone are known the indescribable, fleeting pains which, like the tuning of the strings of the veena, transform his being." The verse goes on to say, "One can understand that we, capital W, that we shall not stress any lack of danger on the path of yoga. How can one avoid pain during the regeneration of the centers?" So I'm going to be talking in a few minutes about the centers and what those centers are. But if you are truly, sincerely on this path of self-perfectment, on the path of Agni Yoga, then spiritual change is the process of living your life, how you live your life. And as the Master says, how can you avoid pain during the regeneration of your centers? Regeneration of your centers is spiritual change. The verse goes on to say, all the usual nomenclature for these pains is useless, so long as science will not hasten to understand the significance of psychic energy, or AKA spirituality. The further removed you are from understanding about the danger of yoga, the further you are from the unity of higher consciousness. So this is a lot to absorb, and it might be kind of shocking for some who are listening to this, but it's not shocking when you read about the biographies of spiritual beings, true spiritual beings. It's not shocking. You recognize, they talk about their pains, but their pains doesn't stop them from living their life. They understand these are sacred pains. Those who seek yoga I'm going on with the verse. Those who seek yoga for robust health, like asanas, right, had better partake of a glass of wine and discuss lofty ideas without applying them to life. For the health of the yogi flutters like the wings of a soaring eagle. The eye of the yogi sees like the eagle eye, which you know. The calm of the yogi is like the tension of an ocean wave. Okay, so let's talk about regeneration of the centers. As we study the subject of centers in the teachings, you learn about the human constitution and its centers. So if you haven't read about this, if you haven't studied it, I recommend that you read a couple of different healing books written by Torgrim Saradirian, New Dimensions of Healing and the Esoteric Science of Healing. There's also a book by Alice Bailey on esoteric healing. And of course, in Agni Yoga, we have several compilations about the health of an Agni Yogi. So there's a lot out there to study if this is a new introduction for you. So I'm just talking a little bit about the regeneration of these centers. These centers of the human constitution, if you make a list, the base of the spine, it's the lowest center. Then you have the sacral and spleen centers, the solar plexus center, and we're going up the ladder here on the body. You have the heart and throat centers. You have the Ajna center, which corresponds to your pituitary gland, and your head center, which corresponds to the pineal gland. These centers, these are all part of, there's a lot of activity, a lot of heat, a lot of movement, even though it's subtle, a lot of movement, heat, change, as you are practicing and walking this path of Agni Yoga. How is that? Because of the disciplines that are so well stated that an Agni Yogi can practice on this path. These centers are found in the etheric body of our human constitution. They have corresponding glands. These centers have corresponding physical glands in our physical body. These centers are also found in the astral body and the mental body, but these centers are of a more refined substance. The regeneration of the centers, spiritual change. The regeneration of these centers requires transmutation and transformation, thereby or thus creating spiritual change. See, so if you are 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, this is not a time to ever retire from life. You might be fortunate enough to retire from your profession, but not from living your life and bringing about spiritual change. The regeneration of the centers requires transmutation, and transformation, like I said. So regeneration of these centers requires an exchange of energy. An exchange of energy and force. It's just an amazing science that this activity is invisible, but it can be felt as you experience it. Regeneration of the centers requires an exchange of energy and force from the higher to the lower, bringing down more refined substance. If you're a musician and you've studied tonality and you've studied vibration, you know that there's a difference between a higher note and a lower note, higher octaves and lower octaves. Higher notes have a basic substance but more refined. So if you take, for example, middle C, it produces a particular tonality. If you take that middle C and take it up 7 notes, that middle C tone is still there, but it is of a higher frequency. So what we're trying to do is bring a more refined music, into these centers, which then begin to affect all of these glands and organs in our physical body. So we're going to feel it. People, I think, who are really psychically sensitive do have the ability to see this process taking place. But those of us with normal eyes, we don't, but we feel it. We're going to feel this energy and this force as it is functioning through the process of the higher coming into the lower. The higher cosmic ethers are extremely beautiful and imbued with the fire of space. Well, you say, well, how do you know that? You can see this through art. You can see this through, let's take composers of music. You have some composers that are really, really incredibly wonderful. And the music that they have manifested has continued for hundreds and hundreds of years. You're not going to find pop music continuing on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Why? Because it's made of dense, coarse sound, less refined sound. We'll think of Nicholas Rourke, who is a master artist. We're told that his centers were so refined that he could see color that the normal eye could not see or perceive. When you take the artwork of a less refined artist and compare it to the artwork of a great master, you're going to feel the difference when you see that painting from this painting. The higher cosmic ethers are extremely beautiful and imbued with the fire of space. Eventually, the Agni yogi will draw these higher energies into their lower nature, which causes what? Spiritual change. So if you are on the path of Agni Yoga, the path of self-perfectment, you are going to experience spiritual change through transmutation and transformation. It is not easy. It is challenging, and it's confrontational. And it requires utmost honesty, and honesty that any vanity found lurking in the corners of the yogi's personality will impede. Here's a story. A sage said to a group of aspirants, if you want to raise a person from mud and filth, do not think it is enough to keep standing on the top and reaching down to him with a helping hand. You must go all the way down yourself. See, what this means is you can't stand out here and observe the process of spiritual change in others and think that you yourself are going to change. And the same thing is you are undergoing change yourself, spiritual change, regeneration of these centers, does not mean you don't have to help those around and about you. So it's an exchange, it's a giving and a receiving. See? I look at, for example, I see a lot of selfish spiritual people. Their selfishness is demonstrated oftentimes through the odd clothing that they wear. They wear odd clothing to stand out to other people, so other people can recognize how holy they are, how spiritual they are. Or they engage in meditation practices that closes them off from their family and their friends because they're not reaching down to help others, see, but putting themselves in an exclusive environment that it has like a moat around them, that nobody else is going to cross that moat. And so they think they're exclusive, they're spiritual, they're holy, and wow, you better pray to them. I remember writing, this is before I moved to Arizona, and I was in Arizona on a trip, and this friend of mine took me from Phoenix up to the high country where we live now. And the person kept putting essential oil all over themselves. And it was horrible. I mean, I had to lower the window a little bit. It became overwhelming. And I said, what are you doing? She said, well, I have to protect myself from you. And the oils is how I can do this. See, that's the opposite of this story. If you want to raise a person from mud and filth, do not think it's enough to keep standing on top and reaching down. You must go all the way down yourself, down into the mud and filth. Then take hold of him with strong hands and pull him and yourself out into the light. Here's another story. It is said that soon after his enlightenment, the Buddha passed a man on the road who was struck by an extraordinary radiance and peacefulness of his presence. The man stopped and said, my friend, who are you? Are you a celestial being or a god? No, said the Buddha. Well, then, are you some kind of magician or a wizard? Again, the Buddha answered, no. Are you a man? No. Well, my friend, what then are you? The Buddha replied, I am awake. Transmutation and transformation are steps toward our enlightenment. The first step is transmutation. Transmutation occurs when energies come from the higher substance into the lower centers. Higher substance comes into our lower centers found in the etheric body. And that higher substance then begins to transform the nature of those lower centers. This process of transformation begins to reflect itself like a mirror the truer nature of one's divine archetype. The next major stage of spiritual change is transfiguration. So we go from transformation, that's like one stage of consciousness, until we finally graduate and advance into this next change called transfiguration. Transfiguration is where higher cosmic ethers replace your lower ethers. The atoms of your lower ethers then enter into your physical body, where they are assimilated, making your physical body more sensitive and ethereal. If you read the book At the Threshold of the New World, written by Helena Rourke, where she talks about these experiences, then it makes it more real to you, to us. At this stage of spiritual change, we become more sensitive to light, more sensitive to sound and fragrance, more sensitive to the needs of others, and more sensitive to hierarchy, and later on Shambhala. All of this is a process that leads us to spiritual change. What are the higher ethers? The higher ethers are called the intuitional plane, the atmic plane, the monadic plane, and the divine plane. These are the higher ethers. The lower ether is the substance from which our physical body is made. There's so much I could like to talk about. We'll have a seminar and do that someday. So this is like a 101, right? The introduction. The four cosmic ethers, again, intuitional, atmic, monadic, and divine plane. These four cosmic ethers are beyond the consciousness of most people. So it's not real for them. The reason they are beyond the consciousness of most people is because they are beyond the mental body. Nonetheless, some people have an awareness, thank heavens, of the higher ethers. They first learn about it through their studies. And then sometimes a certain amount of influence through the help of their higher self, through contact with their master, or also when they are in the advanced stages of meditation. Now, transmutation. Transmutation first requires purification of the physical, emotional, and lower mental bodies. To me, the easiest way to understand purification is that we're cleaning up our past. What is cleaning up our past? Paying our karmic debts. That's how we clean ourselves, purify ourselves. It also means the elimination of glamours and illusions. See, it's hard work. This is hard work. You can't, when people say, I'm purified, well, God bless you, but how come you have all these problems going on in your life that are keeping you from experiencing freedom and beauty and joy? See? Because you're still mired in karma. So, we're going to try to eliminate those glamours and illusions. It also requires bringing more of the substance of the intuition, which is the fourth cosmic ether. Bringing the substance, that energy of the intuitional sphere of life into our lower ethers, igniting these lower ethers with higher fire. when approximately 50% of our lower etheric body is changed by intuition, this energy of intuition, the fourth cosmic ether, then our personality bodies begin to change. Now, this is interesting. It's sort of like, who cares? But I do. Anyway, so this is, a little bit of gosh, I don't want to call it trivia because it's really important. But to people who don't know it and understand it, it'll be trivia. I say, who cares? But this is it. The Buddhic plane is the fourth cosmic ether. It is the lowest vibrational level that is not made of dense physical substance. And this is from a cosmic perspective. The Buddhic plane is such a transitional, vibrational level from which dense form, cosmically speaking, precipitates, concretizes, and densifies. It is the regenerative energy from the higher into the lower. It releases our personality from the control of those four lower centers of the astral plane. These four lower centers of the astral plane are called the base of the spine, the generative organs, the solar plexus, and spleen. When we continue to exchange more of the lower with the intuitional plane, then we're going to release ourselves from the control of these four centers on the mental plane. So these four centers, the base of the spine, generative organs, solar plexus, and spleen, are on the mental plane and the astral plane. As the control of these centers are released, they liberate our consciousness to finally now function in the higher mental plane. See, we're functioning now in the causal body. This is when the chalice, the content of the chalice, and the petals of the lotus are now fully unfolded. And the human soul is finally completely awakened and born. It is at the stage of transfiguration, or the third initiation, where we can now fully escape the limitations of the lower ethers and function in this higher mental plane of consciousness. Spiritual change, right? The etheric body is the body of prana and the prototype of our physical body. Prana energizes our system. The etheric body is a most important protective substance to our human constitution and also to ourselves as a person. Now, what do we mean by this? It protects us from a premature contact with the higher fires along the spine. This is why we don't encourage Kundalini meditation, because it's going to break that protective web. It renders the veils, and it brings, and it's such an intense fire into the nature of the individual that they become insane. I'm just putting that very simply. They become insane. But it is there that protective substance of the etheric body is built into our system as we undergo spiritual change. It protects us until we're ready to take that next step. The substance of the higher ethers can replace the substance of the lower ethers safely only through self-discipline, mind control, purification of physical, emotional, and mental bodies, and dedication to sacrifice, sacrificial service, and joy. Now, what needs to be changed? Our etheric body is exactly like our physical body. So we're supposed to take a look at our physical body and see if there is anything in our body that has been used destructively. Wrong thinking, excessive sex, unhealthy sexual relations, rotten thinking, depression, irritation, imperil. All of these things must first be repaired and then thrown out so that these higher ethers can increase in our lower bodies and replace the discarded parts. Are you still with me? Okay. The degree to which we are able to purify our lower ether and replace the lower ether by higher ethers is going to be the degree of our illumination. We must, to travel on the path of transformation, the path of spiritual change, aspire to something greater. Aspire to change ourselves. How can we aspire to change ourselves if we are not inspired to make that change? Inspiration will come to us by contact with something higher or greater than ourselves. For example, sun festivals, also known as full moon meditation gatherings, can charge us with a moment of inspiration, particularly Aries, Taurus, Gemini, those three major solar festivals. It will be that moment of inspiration that will create a spiritual tension within our consciousness that will cause us to aspire to change ourselves. So what is spiritual tension? As a musician, let's say that you decide that you're going to manifest all the color, all the sound from a particular note. And you're not going to allow that note to become out of tune. And so you have to determine what that note is. We all have, actually. Our physical body has a note. Our emotional or astral body has a note. Our lower mental body has a note. Our higher bodies also have a note, but they become a triad. It's called the Holy Triad. There are three notes that work together like a chord. And these notes produce color and sound, creative activity. We just have to figure out what that note is. And that note is oftentimes given us when you read. There's a book written by Torkim called The Aura that has a list of what note corresponds with that. There is a spiritual teacher, her name is Corinne Helene, and she's written numerous books about these notes and sound and color and how they relate to us. So I'm getting a little off the path here, but not really. I can't use that word. Off track a little bit here, but track is path too, right? Anyway, pick a note. Okay. Until you really understand it and hear it, eventually at some point your spiritual ear is going to hear that note. And that's the note that you want to be constant. That the constant sounding of that note will inspire you and hold your inspiration, cause you to aspire to change yourself, to allow yourself to be shaped into a sensitive instrument. Inspiration can come in the form of a call, a vision, and energy which comes to you from a higher source and invites you to work on a higher level, to do some kind of labor which in the past you were not ready to do, but now you are capable of doing. You can hear the call, and you can respond by saying, "Yes, Lord, I am ready." To prepare yourselves, you must try to live in the light of 7 principles. These are principles that Torquem Saradarian talked and wrote about incessantly. The principles of beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, freedom, striving, and sacrificial service, as well as living a life of virtue, especially the practice of harmlessness. So what are we going to purify? Pure food. This reminds me of, I was listening to a live video Zoom presentation of the Dalai Lama last night with Greta Thunberg. And one of the questions asked of him was about his health. And the Dalai Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama, said, I'm doing really well. And they said, well, how? How is your health doing so well? It was so simple. He said, because I eat good food. And that good food helps my digestion, to keep my digestion working. And I sleep 8 to 10 hours. That's why I'm doing so well. That's pure food. I just thought that was so cool. It was such a simple answer. Also, pure sexual relationships. In sexual relations, the aura of the two people mix together like 2 bottles of colored water. If one person is clean and the other has lots of germs, you are going to pollute your aura. And you will lose your contact with inspiration. That's a lot to think about. When you lose your contact with inspiration, you're going to stop meditating. You're going to stop reading and studying, and things will fall apart within your system. You're going to find yourself deviating from this path of transformation, which is the path of spiritual change. Negative emotions. You must purify your negative emotions. Once you clean yourself of negative emotions, then you will become emotionally magnetic. Mental purification is very interesting. For example, to think about mental purification, you think about, here we go again, the vibration of one note. Okay. If you sound one note in perfect pitch, then all that is not in harmony with that note will not be attracted to it. It's not going to be attracted to that one note. It will be rejected and eventually fall away. This is what we must do with our mental body. We must be one-pointed and focused, so that anything that is not in harmony with our one-pointedness will fall away. Such as, here we go again, vanity. Vanity, ego, even information and so forth will drop away and unable to negatively influence our mind. So it's like a person was talking to me the other day about how they were literally, physically, emotionally, mentally sick, literally vomiting when they were watching what happened on the Hill, our Capitol building. I thought, that's pretty traumatic. Why? Because I can't even imagine. I don't mean to sound critical. It's like, what happened to the harmony? See, the sounding of that one note. Listening to Colin Powell this morning, he didn't say he started vomiting because of what was happening, at the Capitol. He didn't say this country is doomed forever. He kept that one note of harmony and talked about the power of this country and what our future is going to be because of this next administration coming in, and things are going to get back, but be even better than what it was. See, so let us not vomit everything that's happening. Okay. And let's keep that note of harmony in constant sound. Mental purity can be achieved only through right meditation. Right meditation means to raise the level of the vibration of the mental body so that it meets the vibration of one's solar angel. As your human soul meets the vibration of your solar angel, and you penetrate into that whole sphere of the solar angel, your mind becomes purified. How can we tell the sweet that is phony from the sweet that is from a higher source? This is kind of silly, but this statement reminds me of sour candy, where it starts out to be sweet. It's like, oh, wow, this is tasty. That boom, all of a sudden it turns sour and you want to spit it out. It's so horrible. Isn't that? I thought that was such a good example. Anyway, how can you tell the sweet that is phony from the sweet that is from a higher source? The devil is always dressed beautifully, but his tail forever remains at the crossroads of the door. Through the purification of our threefold nature, we're going to become magnetic. To the degree of our purification is to the degree that we're going to receive inspiration. And it is the inspiration that causes us to aspire toward spiritual change. And that's a lot to think about. I knew it was a lot. How am I going to do this? But some talks have to be challenging, and ask from us to concentrate as we listen and then think and study, take notes, reevaluate, and try to live according to the level of our understanding. So that's it, the spiritual process of change. Have a good week.